Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really powerful and, honestly, pretty controversial idea from Catholic history, modernism. So, the synthesis of all heresies. Wow. That was the label Pope St. Pius X slapped on modernism way back in 1907. He did it in an encyclical, which is, a big formal letter from the Pope, called Pascendi Dominici Gregis. And that is a heavy title. It basically means that every other wrong idea, every heresy, kind of finds its root in this one. So what is this thing? And why did it get such a dramatic label? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. We're going to dig into what this so-called heresy is all about, why the church saw it as so dangerous, and, according to our sources, how its influence is still around today. Okay, first things first. To really get what's going on, we have to be super clear about what modernism means in this specific context. This isn't about modern art or architecture. Okay, so at its heart, modernism was this big attempt by some Catholic thinkers to, get their faith in sync with the modern world back in the late 1800s. And you gotta think about what was going on then. You had Darwin's theory of evolution shaking things up, brand new ways of analyzing the Bible popping up, and all these philosophies that were all about individual experience over some big objective truth. The idea was to make Catholicism seem credible to the modern person. But, and this is the key part, the way they went about it ended up changing the very definition of faith itself. And this is where it gets really fascinating. This one big idea, modernism, isn't just one thing. It's actually made up of a few core errors that, when you put them together, totally reshape Catholicism from the inside out. Our source material breaks it down into 4 main pillars. So let's walk through them, because once we do, you'll start to see exactly why Pope Pius X called it the synthesis of all heresies. Okay, this first one is a huge deal. It basically says you can't prove God exists through reason. So what's left? Only your personal religious feeling. It yanks the foundation of faith out from under objective, knowable truth and sticks it right inside a person's emotions or gut feelings. This idea has a name, by the way: vital immanence. The belief that God reveals himself through this deep, internal, personal feeling, not through, logic or things that happen in the world. And this slide, man, it just lays out the conflict perfectly. The traditional Catholic view? It's like, the truth is a diamond. It's fixed. It doesn't change, but we can look at it from different angles and understand it better over time. But the modernist view? Whoa, totally different. It says those dogmas, the core beliefs, aren't actually fixed truths at all. They're just symbols for an experience. And as our experiences change, the symbols have to change, or even be thrown out and replaced. So you can see where this is going, right? If you follow this logic, then all the external stuff, miracles, prophecies, the Bible being divinely inspired, all of that gets pushed to the side. What's left? The only thing that matters is your own personal, subjective religious experience. That's it. Okay, so let's talk about the stakes here. Why was the church so alarmed? Why wasn't this just seen as, a different opinion? Why was it considered a profound existential threat? This analogy from our source is just perfect. Theological quicksand. It's such a great image, right? Because it captures the danger so well. On the surface, it all looks solid. You think, hey, I'm just trying to make sense of my faith in the modern world. But underneath your feet, the very foundation, the idea of an objective, unchanging truth, is just dissolving into relativistic mud. You're sinking, and you might not even realize it. And check out this term, theological schizophrenia. It's used to describe the mental split this can create in a person. It's like, as a believer, in your heart, you accept the resurrection, but then you put on your scholar hat and you treat it like a myth. You end up holding 2 completely contradictory ideas at the same time. There's no single unified truth anymore. So, faced with what it saw as a full-blown crisis, the church didn't just wag a finger, oh no. It went on the offensive with a coordinated, all-out counterattack. And this timeline shows you it wasn't a sudden panic. This was a slow burn, building for decades. You see, it starts way back in 1864 with a syllabus of errors. Then the First Vatican Council doubles down on traditional doctrine. It all comes to a head in 1907 with Pope Pius X's big encyclical Pascendi. And then, just a few years later, they institute the Oath Against Modernism, which was a huge deal for all clergy. Yeah, this wasn't just a war of words or theological papers. There were real consequences. We're talking excommunication for the big names. Guys like Father Alfred Losey and Father George Tyrrell. They were literally kicked out of the church. And things got serious internally, too.
Bishops had to report on what they were doing to fight modernism, and anyone with these ideas was supposed to be removed from teaching or positions of power.
So, how do you fight a bad philosophy? Well, with a better one. The Church's prescription was to go back to its intellectual heavyweight champion, scholastic philosophy, especially the work of St. Thomas Aquinas. The whole point of scholasticism is that faith and reason aren't enemies, they work together. The idea was to put theology back on what they saw as a rock-solid logical foundation. So the big question is, did it work? Was modernism defeated? Well, according to our sources, not exactly. It's more like it just went into hiding, only to pop back up decades later in a new form, something people now call Neo-Modernism. And the source suggests you can see echoes of it all over the place today. In some university theology departments, among people who decide for themselves which church teachings on morality they're going to follow, or even in this idea of a parallel magisterium, basically a group of theologians who act like they have more authority than the Pope and bishops. But if you had to boil it all down to one thing, the common thread is this. It's the preference for an individual's own judgment, their own private opinion, over the official teaching authority of the Church, the Magisterium.
Okay, so if this way of thinking is still around, how is a person supposed to deal with it? Well, the source material lays out a really clear three-part defense.
It's a pretty straightforward game plan. Step 1, know your stuff. Study philosophy, the catechism, and apologetics. Step 2, stick with the official teaching. Trust the magisterium instead of just going with your own gut feeling on everything. And step 3, build up your spiritual life through prayer and the sacraments. Our source calls this a solid lifeline, the perfect way to stay on firm ground and avoid that theological quicksand. And that really is the ultimate so what of this whole thing. The argument is that this isn't just some intellectual debate. It's about protecting the actual path to salvation. It's about the comfort and stability that comes from believing there's a truth that doesn't change with the whims of the world. And this isn't just ancient history. I mean, look at this quote from Pope Benedict XVI. He said that this whole anti-modernist fight was absolutely essential for keeping the Church from sinking into the liberal bourgeois world. In other words, it kept the Church from just becoming another reflection of the surrounding culture. Which really brings us to the final question, and it's a big one. It takes this whole story out of the history books and puts it right in front of us today. In a world that is constantly, relentlessly changing, what's the value of an unchanging truth?